Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Talk Spicy. I'm Coach Gene Clemens. Thank you for joining me wherever you were joining me. Rate the show, comment, agree, disagree, whatever you do, keep it spicy. 5-star ratings are appreciated. If you're joining me on the YouTube channel, make sure you like, make sure you subscribe. I had been teasing about talking about the GHSA reclassification for a few days, and somebody asked me my thoughts, and I told them tune in this morning. You would get it. So if you're people who listen around the country to me normally or watch me from around the country, this is going to be a little bit more local of a pod, but I think it applies everywhere because I know that everyone deals with issues about fairness and balance and equality and all those other things that we would hope that the governing bodies of our high school athletics department, high school athletics thinks about when they decide to do these things, because fairness and equality and balance are impossibilities that we all want to happen, right? They're all things that we look at and we say, this is impossible to get, but that doesn't mean we don't want it. So with that being said, I looked at when the classifications came out, and when they came out, I was under the impression that things that were happening and things that were going on was being done for a particular reason and not for anything more than just, hey, we want to try to like even things up, because evening things up isn't necessarily balance, right? Evening things up isn't necessarily getting it right. What it does is it just smushes things into one little box. So I'll start from what I believe is the beginning, and please, bear with me. The GHSA decided that they were going to eliminate 7A. The way that the classifications worked is they go from 1 to 7A, 7A being the highest. Those are the largest schools, and they were going to eliminate 7A because 7A has the smallest amount of schools. It had 46 schools. And so they got rid of 7A and essentially made them the new 6A and brought up around 19 schools into 6A. And so that classification at 7A went from being 46 schools at 7A to being 65 schools at 6A. Now, while that sounds like a great idea, while that sounds like right, what it did was it took the rest of the 6A schools and kind of mashed them into the 5A schools. And the 5A schools were then reclassified and so on and so forth. And so what happened is that you had more teams in a smaller amount of classifications, right? Which sounds like you would have a little bit more even classifications, correct? Except the byproduct of that is you don't have them all equidistant to each other across the state. And here is what is the byproduct of what has happened. You now have either regions that are way too big, or you have people having to make trips that are way too far for a competitive balance. Like way too far for competitive balance. You already had teams having to drive 2 hours to play a game. Imagine being a basketball team and you've got a game away. It's 2 hours away on a Monday, but you know we're all in a bus shortage, right? And so because of that, you have to ensure that you can get a bus to the game, which means that you have to leave super early for the game. You can't wait. You have to leave because the bus has to get back by the end of school to do their bus routes. So you have to leave from school at like 11 o'clock, at 12 o'clock. You get up there. Your game's not until 7. So now you're up there, took you 2 hours. You get up there at 1 o'clock. You get up there at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. Now you've got to just wait around for 4 hours, 5 hours, in some cases 6 hours for a game to start, only to then have that game go at its normal length. You get back on the bus that's been driving around all day, picking up and dropping off kids, that drove 2 hours to get you, and now it's coming 2 hours back to get you and has to drive 2 hours home. You're not getting home. You're not getting home until somewhere close to midnight. Then you have to finish whatever it is you need to finish, shut it down, and then get some sleep. This is the life that you've put these high school athletes in because of the balance that you were trying to get. And that's only the small part, because the byproduct of these situations is that we now have regions that are 10 teams deep. And I'm not just saying this because it's the region that my team plays in, because this isn't about everybody trying to win a trophy. This isn't about everybody trying to be a champion. I've never subscribed to, oh, we need more champions. This just makes sense. So now our region, because of teams that don't want to go up and because of teams that wanted to come up, is 10 teams deep. 10 teams deep. Which means that in football, you have 9 region games starting week number 2. So now you're probably thinking to yourself, okay, well, that sounds super competitive. That sounds crazy. That sounds great. Yeah, except you're still trying to learn your team. You're still trying to figure things out. You're still trying to map things out. We were in a 17 region last year, or the last couple of years. 7 teams. That felt like a lot. 6 region games on the back end. But you know what it did? It was nice because it gave us 4 games to kind of figure out who we were. Not to just try to get wins, but just to figure out who we were and what we were going to be, because there is no real legitimate preseason in football. There is no real legitimate offseason in football. See, in basketball, you can come into the basketball season and know exactly who you're going to be. Why? Because you had summer leagues and you had, travel opportunities. You had practice games. You can't do practice football games. The sport is too violent. And in the summertime, you were afforded 2 padded camps. 1 a month, 1 in June, 1 in July. You're afforded 2 padded camps. That's all you get. That's it. This year, in our second padded camp, we lost one of our starting offensive defensive linemen, a guy who was going to be a really good football player for us, a guy who came into his own as a junior. He was coming along. He was a captain a leader, and now he was gone because of a paddock camp that we had in the summertime. He was gone. Entire senior season done. That's the roll of the dice that you do with football. That's not like any other sport that's out there. When it comes to football, you don't play. You live it because people get hurt. Right? People get hurt. And so now with the situation of a 10-team region, you don't have the luxury of easing into a football season. Can you afford to do a preseason game? Can you afford to do a kickoff or a jamboree the week before week 1? Right? Can you afford to? Well, you gotta do a preseason game now. Yeah, you do. Because if you get somebody hurt in that preseason game, they only have 1 week to get better before all the games count. They only have 1 week to get better before all the games matter. There is no easing into the season. You know what could happen if you had a kid get a high ankle sprain? If a kid got a high ankle sprain on a Monday, on a game during the preseason, they had a few weeks to get healthy before they came back to school. Before they came back. Now, because you have a 10-team region, you get week number 1. Week number 1 to figure out who you are. Week number 1 to stay healthy. Week number 1 to get everything going before all the games matter. Before all the games matter. And now, every single week you're on. It's a 9-game region, which means every single week you have a game that can make or break your season. Somebody tell me how that seems to make sense. I would have no issue with it. I would have no problem with it if you told me that every region was 10 teams. But every region is not 10 teams. Every region is not 10 teams. And therein lies the issue. Well, issue number 2, right? Because every region's not 10 teams. So now we are in Class 3A. We're in Class 3A, and we're in 3A by our own doing, because we have to the people have to accept the responsibility. Our school was actually a 2A team. We are classified to be in 2A. And in 2A, we would not be in a 10-team region. But the powers that be wanted the team to be a 3A team. And so because they wanted them to be a 3A team, we're now sitting in a 10-team region. Now, here's what some people think should happen. Oh, well, that 10-team region should get bust down into 2 subdivisions. Here's the problem with that. How do you balance out the subdivisions? So what if one side is really, really competitive and you've got 5 really good teams, and the other side, you have 5 dogs? Because in our 10-team region, you have some teams that are really, really good, and you have some teams that are not really, really good. So you have high-quality teams, and then you have low-quality teams all in the same region. That's fine. But if you split the region, then how do you balance that out? How do you make sure that one side isn't more robust with talent than the other side? More robust with better teams than the other side? There is no way to do it. So now you're further exacerbating a problem. Because at the end of this, at the bottom of it, it looks like It looks like parity, but what it really is annoying. It's annoying, and it's not just annoying because you've got one region with 10 teams in it. It's annoying because you have other regions that don't nearly have 10 teams in it. Remember, I'm not just talking about 10 teams being in a region. I'm talking about 10 teams being in a region where all 10 of them play football. GHSA, Class 3A, Region 1, 6 teams. Region 2, 9 teams, but 3 of the teams don't play football. Region 3, that's our region, 10 teams, all of them play football. All of them play football. And so now teams like Beach and Groves and Johnson and Windsor Forest, who everybody would assume are the 4 worst teams in the region, right? We would all be considered to be the 4 worst teams. Then you would have the teams that are probably right now considered to be in the middle. Oh, excuse me, my bad. Islands would be down there with us. So the 5 worst teams in the region. And then you have the 5 upper teams in the region in no particular order. No particular order. You've got Calvary, Southeast Bullock, Long County, Liberty, Jenkins. So now you've got 5 teams that are nowhere near in the same competition as the other 5 teams. In a 10-team region, guess who's hurt? The area. Because now the area in Savannah, there's 7 teams in the region are all from Savannah, which means off rip, right? Before anything happens, you're going to have less representation from your area in the playoffs. It's the law of unintended consequences, right? Hey, we want to be 3A. Okay, cool. Well, you're in a 10-team region. So now if you're not in the top 4 of that region, even when you pull Calvary Day out of there because they're a private school and now they're going to go to the private school playoffs, that still leaves 9 teams. So now you've got to be the top 4 of 9. Oh, well, it's parity, it's even. Is it? When you look at the population numbers of Southeast Bullock and you look at the population numbers of Liberty County and the population numbers of Jenkins and of Islands, they don't compare at all to the population numbers of Beach, of Groves, of Johnson, of Windsor Forest. When you look at the numbers as populated on the team, they don't equal out. Jenkins around here with 130 kids on their team. Beach couldn't finish the season because they didn't have enough kids on it. They lost their starting quarterback in the middle of the year who transferred to one of the other schools. How is this equitable? How is this fair? Meanwhile, you have other regions who have 5 and 6 teams in a region. So now you just have to be better than 2 other teams in order to make the playoffs. Meanwhile, in our region, you got to be better than 5. You've got to be better than 5. How is that just to make it? Not to get the first seed, not to get the second seed. You've got to be better than 5 teams just to make it. This isn't me complaining about competitiveness. I'm looking forward to playing all the teams in that region. I think that's going to be a really, really awesome thing. But that's a bloodbath, ladies and gentlemen. That is week after week after week after week after week. You've got to be up. You can't have an off week because every game you lose, that is more of a chance you're not making the playoffs. Hey, come out the gate like some of our city schools have come out the gate in the past. Right? In region play. Come out the gate in region play and go 0-3. Your season is over. You are not running off 6 straight on region games. I don't care what your schedule looks like. You're going to get upset by somebody. You go 0-3 out the gate in a 10-team region. You go 0-3 in the region out the gate, and you got 6 games coming. Number one, once you go 0-3, the morale's going to be crashed. So now you're going to start losing players. Now you're going to have to recalibrate who your team is. You're going to have to make some changes. It's going to take a few weeks for that to take hold. 0-3 is going to turn into 0-5. Then you're going to have people decide they don't want to play. Oh, man, I'm just going to enjoy my senior year. Oh, man, I'm transferring, so I ain't going to play. We've heard it all, right? Meanwhile, because there's a 10-team region over here, there's another region in 2A where they had to get people to come all the way from the West Coast over to play guys that are closer to the East. How is that fair to those teams when they have to travel all the way? Oh, well, it's on a Friday. So that makes it okay? You should have seen some of these trips that these kids at Jenkins High School had to take in the middle of a season. It's ridiculous. They driving all over the state to play football games when there was an equitable region for them to be in. The last 2 years, they've been in 5A. Didn't make any sense for them to be in 5A. It didn't make sense by population. It didn't make sense by travel. But that's where they were. And in that level of a region, with things going on,
thank you. Have a good day.
I can't understand for the life of me why somebody didn't go, hey, listen, I know that technically this is where they're supposed to be, but this doesn't make any sense. And so instead, this year, until they switch next year, their basketball team's going to be 2 hours away on a Tuesday to play a basketball game, only to get home, turn around, and on Thursday, go 2.5 hours away again. And you're telling me that makes sense if they're supposed to be student athletes? It's a bus shortage in Savannah. The same way there's a bus shortage all around the state. In some counties, they've got coaches driving their own buses. Why? Because there's not enough bus drivers. So you want a coach to teach all day, jump on a bus, drive their kids to a basketball game on a Tuesday, coach the basketball game, jump on the bus, drive them 2.5 hours home after being up for over 12 hours, get home or drop everybody off by midnight, get home by 1-something in the morning, and be right back at work at 6:45 in the morning? And somehow people think this is cool? I worked in a county that had coaches. They said, hey, every coach got to get their CDL because you got to drive the buses. I said, you got me all the way messed up. I didn't even use those words. You know what I use. You've been around me long enough. I didn't use those words. I'm not going to be responsible for lives in my hands at 12:30 at night after I've been up since 5:45 in the morning, driving a bus that most likely isn't maintenance to the level it's supposed to be, doesn't operate the way it should, and me having little to no experience riding a bus. But that is the life that we're in now. This is because, oh, well, we've got one too many classifications. Who cares if 7A has 40-something teams in it? Why couldn't they have just taken the 19 teams or 10 teams from 6A, push them up to 7A, taking the high-level 5As, push them up to 6A, and left everything alone? What would it have hurt? There would have been no issue with that. But here we are. Nobody can make it make sense because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense if you're talking about these kids as student athletes. It doesn't make sense logistically. It doesn't make sense as far as balanced, and it doesn't make sense as far as fair. But it'll be fun. 10 teams in one region all playing football. It's going to be fun. Because from the moment week 2 hits, every single game matters. Don't get hurt in that preseason game, because by the time you come back in week 4 or week 5, your season might be over. And if your season's over and you're a senior, what's to keep that coach from saying, hey, I got to start looking to next year? So, yeah, I know you're a senior, but I got to get next year's kids ready to play for this 10-team region so that they don't walk into the season with no experience and only one preseason game and one regular season game to get ready for a 9-game, really competitive region. The mix of the county schools, and us in city and the private, it's going to make for a very fun region, but it's going to be brutal. Strap in, ladies and gentlemen. And if you're in a state where they're doing that to you, you got to start talking to some people. Ladies and gentlemen, that's Talk Spicy. I'm Coach Gene Clemens. Do this thing a few times a week. Rate the show. Comment, agree, disagree, but whatever you do, keep it spicy. 5-star ratings are appreciated. And if you're joining me on the YouTube channel, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you like, make sure you subscribe. Till next time, peace.